If you're watching this video, then that means that your teacher decided that you are capable of creating your own level. So we're going to walk through what it takes to do that and some of the things to keep in mind while we're going through and creating our own custom level. To start, what we need to do is in our project panel down here at the bottom of our screen, we need to select the scenes folder and find the level that says tutorial level. It should be the only thing you see in this folder. What we'll do next is with the object selected, again by left clicking on the scene here, we're going to hold down the Control or Command key and press D. And that's going to create a duplicate of our tutorial level. You can see which level we have selected by clicking on them and seeing in the top right of our inspector, it lists our name. The duplicate level will be called Tutorial Level 1, the other one just Tutorial Level. Let's rename the Tutorial Level 1 scene to Our Scene by right-clicking on it and choosing Rename. We'll name this My Scene. Once you have that renamed, we can just double-click right on it, and that's going to open up our identical duplicated scene here. Make sure that we are in our scene view by, again, moving up to the top left and finding the tab that says Scene and clicking on that. We can now navigate our scene once again by holding down the right click with our mouse in the scene view and turning our mouse to look around. We can also press W, A, S, and D to fly around in our scene. So let's move our scene camera back so we can see the whole level. If we fly around, you can see everything that's listed here. The important things to know about are our silver coins here. There are these 3 golden coins. And I think the bottom one is down here. And then this blue gem up at the top. This blue gem is the final thing that our player is going to collect. And when they collect this, the level will end. So this is something that we want to make sure we put at the end of our level. Before we get to moving things around and adjusting our level to something else, we need to understand how our enemies work. So our enemies are controlled by what's called the enemy controller script. And if you were to click on one of these little robots, you'd see this grounded enemy script here. This grounded enemy script has what's called an array of transforms. You can think of that as a list. Each of these 4 transforms labeled waypoint underscore enemy and then the enemy number. So for example, this is the first enemy we encounter, so it gets the enemy 1 transforms. If we select the second enemy, you'll see it gets enemy 2. The third enemy, enemy 3, and so on all the way through our level until you get to the last one here with, if you ever select one of these and it just selects the head, you can actually look in your hierarchy and see which robot this belongs to. So this belongs to robot 9, and if you select it, you'll see it gets enemy 10. You might be thinking, well, if this is robot 9, why does it get enemy 10 here? That's because our robots don't actually start at robot 1, but robot 0. So robot 0 gets enemy 1 transforms, robot 1 gets enemy 2, and so on up to our 10th enemy. Every time we move one of these enemies somewhere else, we have to do 2 things. We have to obviously use the movement gizmo to reposition our enemy where we'd like them to be, but we also need to reposition the enemy transforms. So what the easiest way to do that is to click the transform directly inside of our grounded enemy component here. What that will do is highlight which transform that represents inside of our hierarchy. So you'll see every time I click on it, it does the little yellow outline and it does a little animation pointing out to us where that is. We can also just double click right on the transform there to automatically select it. What we need to do is put these transforms somewhere that is accessible by our robot's new position. Excuse me. So in this case, our robot has been moved to this platform, but all 4 of these enemy 1 transforms are on the previous platform. So we have 2 options here. We can move them all individually by selecting one at a time and using our movement gizmo to move it over to where our enemy is and where we'd like them to go. Or we can select all 4 of them at once by selecting the top one and the bottom one while holding the shift key. So if I'm holding shift and I press enemy 1 and then press enemy 1 at the bottom here, I'm now selecting all 4. You'll still only see one movement gizmo, but you'll notice if I move this over to our new platform and then select each one at a time. Now all 4 of them have been moved to our new position. I'm going to press the Ctrl-Z key to undo those movements because I actually want to keep mine where it is. So I'm going to press Ctrl-Z until I see my robot pop back over there. Now we can begin to talk about how to customize this level and make it unique to us. So in our Assets panel down here in the Project panel, we can go to the Assets folder, and we're actually going to open the folder called Resources. Inside Resources are going to be all the folders and files we need relevant to our curriculum here for the intro project. So if we double click on Resources, we'll see 2 more folders called Prefabs and Scripts. And for us to be able to edit our level, we're going to be working mostly out of the Prefabs folder. So if we double click into Prefabs, you'll see 4 more folders called Blocks, Characters, Decorations, and Pickups. Our level prefabs, the ones associated with these blocks and the actual places our player will be moving around, are going to be in the Blocks folder. To add one of these to your level, simply click or left click and drag it out into your scene. You'll notice that they start out pretty small. So what we want to do is up that scale to something that matches our player size. The easiest way to see if it looks right would be to move it using the movement gizmo right next to our player, and then press the R key to pull up our scaling gizmo, and click on this center block here, the gray block, to scale it in all 3 directions at the same time. While it's next to our player, we'll simply drag this to the right to increase its size, and we'll do that until we feel like it's a nice size compared to our player. I think at this point it looks pretty good. And we'll have to do that with every block we want to add to our scene. I don't want to make use of that block. I think I'm going to use some of these other ones. I actually quite like these ramps and these cliffs. So I'm going to add some extra cliffs to the outside of our levels to give our players some more pickups to have. So again, I drag that to our scene. I move it close to our player to see how the size compares to how big our player is. I press the R key to bring up our scaling gizmo, click on the center block, and drag to the right until I think it's at a good size. I think that looks pretty good. Now I need to place this somewhere in our level. So I press the W key, and I use the movement gizmos once again to find a good spot for this. I think I'm going to put this over here next to our first couple platforms. Oh, to bring up the rotation gizmo that allows you to turn a block and make it so that you can align it with the edge of another block, you press the E key and it pulls up our rotation gizmo. Another trick you can use is hold the Control or Command key while you do your rotation to snap between values. Keep in mind that you can also do all of this scaling and position changes and rotation as well by just changing the values in our transform component in the inspector. So I'm going to rotate this back to -180. That's going to spin it around 100% from the direction it was originally facing. And then I'm going to use my movement gizmo and moving around in the scene with holding right click in the scene camera. I'm going to move around in our scene and try to line this up as best as I can with the side of this platform. This platform is a lot bigger than our cliff here, so I'm going to actually scale our cliff up in the X direction, that is along this red arrow, by pressing the R key and dragging this red block to the right. Now I've got like a nice little cliff overhang here on the side of our platform. I want to add a new jumping segment as well. So what I'm going to do next is grab this block moving object here. Don't worry, this block doesn't actually move, that's just what its name is. Once again, I'm going to grab the gray square here and drag to the right to increase the size. I think that looks pretty good. And I'm going to position this next to our cliff. There we go. Keep in mind that your player does need to be able to jump between these positions. We don't quite have the ability to jump yet, you'll add that in the first week, but you can use similar jumps in other parts of the level to judge how far the player can go. For example, all of these gaps between these platforms are possible to be jumped between. These ones here are particularly difficult, but these gaps here are not. There's also these gaps between these platforms, so you can use those as reference to see how far your player can jump. Once we add the code to make the player jump, you can then refine your level and decide exactly how you want it to be laid out. So I'm going to position this here, and I want this to be a path that leads upwards. So the player is jumping up and up and up. So what I'm going to do is, with the platform selected here, I'm going to hold the Control or Command key and press D. What that's going to do is create a duplicate of, just like we duplicated our scene, this is going to create a duplicate of our platform. And I'm going to position this just above it and to the left, just like that. Now what I'm going to do is hold the Shift key or Control key or Command key, any of those three will work, and select our other platform. Now I'm going to once again press the Control or Command D and duplicate both of these at the same time. I'll then use my movement gizmo to move both of them up into the air. I think I want to give our player a little bit more space, so I'm going to, with these two selected, I'm going to additionally select our first platform and move it slightly up, and then hold the Control key and select our platform again to deselect it, and then move our other two platforms. I'll do the same thing here. I'll deselect our lower platform and move our higher platform up. Now what I can do, well, I'm going to lift it a little bit more. Now again, I'm going to hold Control and select all four, and then press Control D and lift these all the way up until I have a nice little ladder climbing up into the air. Now I want to be careful here, because if I go too high, then my player is going to be able to skip the whole level and jump right to the end. So I'm actually going to select our top platform here and press the Delete key to get rid of that. Now I have a nice little ladder section where the player can climb up. What I want to do is add some coins to incentivize the player to do these jumps. So back in our prefabs folder in the project panel, I go to Pickups and grab Coin Silver. Keep in mind that there are only 3 gold coins in the scene, and we only can have 3 gold coins in the scene. Having any more is going to cause problems for us, so if you'd like to put one of these gold coins somewhere else, or put a gold coin in your new section, I would recommend simply moving a gold coin up to where you'd like it to be. So I want my gold coin at the top here, just like that. For silver coins, we can have as many as we want. So all you need to do to add a silver coin is select it in our Pickups prefab folder and drag it onto the platform. Once we have it placed, we want to lift it up into the air, because our coin has a little animation where it will kind of bounce up and down and spin. So we'll move it up into the air, and then I'm going to duplicate a bunch of these so that I have a little path leading up. So with it selected, I press Control or Command D, and then I make a line moving up here, and then same thing, Control D, Control D, Control D, Control D. Actually, I'm going to delete this last one, and then I'm going to make use of that trick we use for our platforms, where we hold Control and select all of our coins. Oops. Again, if you accidentally select something you didn't mean to, you can just hold the Control key and select it again, and that will deselect the object. With these coins selected, I'll press Control D to duplicate them, and I'll just drag them up until they line up with our upper platforms here, just like that. Looks like I maybe need to align them a little bit differently. So what I'll do is I'll line up our first one with this platform here, and then I'll grab these ones and move them up into the air as well. I'm only going to have some going that high because our player is going to get rewarded with our gold coin once they get to the top. So this will get them started on the path, but then they'll have to get the rest of the way to get that final coin. Another thing that we can do is move around the blocks that already exist. The easiest way to do that is to select the block itself and select anything that's sitting on top of it while holding the Control key. So in this case, I have all of these bushes, or all of these pieces of grass and this little bush here. So while holding Control, I'm going to select all of these, and you'll see that little orange outline appear there. Once I have them selected, I can rotate them with the rotation gizmo, again by pressing the E key. I can scale all of them up by pressing the R key and using our scaling gizmo. And of course I can use our movement gizmo on the W key to move them up, down, left, or right. So I'm going to move this a little bit over, and I'm going to rotate it slightly. And I think I'm also going to scale it and make it a little bit wider. just to give it a little bit of a slightly different look and make things look a little bit less uniform. If I want to add additional versions of these blocks, what I can do is select any of our block prefabs. We'll do one of these curves here, and I could put these wherever I'd like. I think I'm going to put one on top of our level section here. This little mushroom guy is in the way, so I'm just going to select him and press the D key. And then with our arc here selected, I'll press E, hold the control key to snap our rotations. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees to the right so that it's lined up with our platform. Then again, I'll press the R key to pull up our scaling gizmo, and I'll scale it up until I feel like it's at a good size. And I think that looks pretty good. One thing to note about these archways is that it's going to be difficult for our player to walk up these because of how round they are. So we can actually make them less round by bringing up our scaling gizmo, but only upping the scale in the direction of our curve. So in this case, the curve goes along this red axis. So if I grab the red line and drag it out, you'll see it becomes significantly less curved than it was before. So I want to try to line this up with the two edges of our object here. I think that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to make them just a bit wider, just like that. I want to leave our little decorations on the side there, so I think that looks pretty good. If you decide that you want to get rid of a section, say these three things here on the right, you can simply select it and anything on top of it and press the delete key. So I'm going to delete all of these here. Oops. 1, 2, oops. And again, remember, if you select the wrong thing, you can just hold Control and click it again. So I'm going to select all three of these and press delete. And then I don't want to delete my gold coin because we only have 3 of those and we got to have all 3 in the level. So I'm just going to move him over here. You can also change the layout of things that already exist and just move them around by once again selecting them and using the movement gizmo to reposition them. So I'm going to offset all of our little platforms here just a little bit. There we go. And we can even do that with these ones as well. This one will need to be moved a little bit closer because that jump is pretty far. We'll move these guys over here. So now we've got a new layout to those. Once we have our level in the position we'd like it to be, we have to do one more step before we can call it done. We need to go into our hierarchy and collapse all the objects that we have. And you do that by clicking the little arrow. If the arrow is pointing down, that means the object has been expanded. If it's pointing towards the name of the object, that means it's been collapsed. So I want to collapse everything that I see here because it'll help us keep our world neat and also make it more clear to us what we're changing. So once I do all of that, collapse our alien in our canvas, you'll see all those objects that we added ourselves are now listed in our hierarchy. So what we want to do is find the correct thing to store these underneath. If you expand the world option and collapse everything you see here, you'll see we have categories of things we want to organize. So I have these blocks, block moving, and there's one up here as well as our block cliff and our block curve. We want to move these under our blocks object here. So we simply select all of them while holding Control and then click and drag them onto the blocks object. We can then collapse our blocks object again, and we'll see that those guys, when we select our blocks object, it'll select all of our new things that we've just added. We also want to grab all of our coins and move them under the coins object. This is not underworld, but it's its own thing. So we'll drag all of those coins up onto coins. There we go. We also have a coin up here we want to grab. Perfect. And then lastly, our bush, I would probably put in the trees section. So we'll drop that right onto trees. Now we've got all of our nice additions to the level organized, and I think that looks pretty good. So the final thing we need to do is select world. This object here should be checkmarked as static. We're going to uncheck that and say no, this object only, and then check it again. and then it'll say, do you want to enable the static flags for all the child objects as well? We'll hit yes, change children. That's going to mark all of our objects in our world as static, which means that they're not moving. What we need to do now is select the window tab at the top of our screen, go down to AI, and choose navigation. You'll see this blue layer appear over all the areas of our world that we didn't change, but on certain sections, like our cliff and even our little archway here, things are a little mismatched, as well as this part that we rotated here. So what we're going to do is update this. What this is our nav mesh. The nav mesh, in simple terms, is simply the area that our robot guys or our enemies are allowed to walk on. This is how they determine if they're going to run into something like a tree stump or a bucket or a tree. So, with everything marked as static in the navigation panel that appears next to our inspector, which again you can navigate to by clicking the inspector and then tabbing over to navigation. And if you don't see this, remember to hit Window, AI, Navigation, but it should pop up. We're going to click the Bake tab and then select the Bake button. This may take a second depending on the speed of your computer, but once it's done, you should now see that all of those areas that we've changed now have this blue layer over top of them. You're welcome to change the world as much as you like, but again, keep in mind some of the things that we need to do. We need to make sure that our enemies have their waypoints assigned in the inspector. And again, these waypoints represent where our enemy wants to go in the world. They're going to go in order from top to bottom. So if you want to use or move around these waypoints in a custom order, the enemy will move to the first one at the top, then the second one, third one, and fourth one. Some of them only have two, so they'll move from the first one to the second one. We also need to make sure that those 3 gold coins are present in our level somewhere. They don't have to be where I put them originally. You can move them around as you wish. And then finally, we do have to make sure that this jewel stays wherever we intend for the player to end the level. So feel free to change and customize this level as much as you want or as little as you want, but just make sure you keep in mind those few things while you do it. Once you're done, that'll be it for this week, and in the next week we'll get into actually setting up your player and being able to finally play the game.